Happy New Year. We are YaySTEM, and we are beyond thrilled to learn from our guest this month. Dr. John Spencer is an educator, author, consultant, and national speaker. Several years ago, our corporation participated in a book study over Dr. Spencer's book, The Launch Cycle, and it honestly changed our understanding of what STEM is. And we were then introduced to the design thinking model. And since then, project-based learning has become a significant part of our district's mission to bring joy to learning. John's idea that all students can be makers, designers, and engineers K-12 speaks to our goal of bringing the real world into every classroom. Dr. Spencer continues to produce a variety of resources that inspire and challenge the teacher's mindset. One of his other books, Empower, encourages students to own their learning and teachers to be the guides. Our secondary teachers and administrators just completed this book study over Empower this past summer. And welcome, Dr. Spencer.
Great to be here.
To be honest, as a first grade teacher, I'm trying to make sure my students are engaged, they're participating, they're collaborating on whatever activity that we're doing. And then I read your book and you point out that educators need a shift from this engagement to empowerment. Can you tell us a little bit more about that shift?
Yeah, and I think, to clarify, engagement is great. There's a time and a place for engagement. There's a time and a place for compliance. If we think about it on a continuum, you have compliance, I'm doing it because I have to, into engagement, I'm doing it because I want to, and then into empowerment, I'm doing it out of a sense of ownership. And I think all three are necessary. So I'll just give an example from reading. In reading, look, not a lot of kids show up to kindergarten and say, this is the area of phonological awareness and phonemes. You're not going to do that, right? You're going to systematically teach them phonics. That's great. That's compliance. That's necessary. And we can take that compliance, we can make it more engaging, which is also really important. We want it to be engaging. We want to introduce kids to new ideas that they would never seek out on their own. But there should always be that place of empowerment. So it's something as simple as silent reading, getting to read choice-based reading, choice menus, any of those things. And so a lot of these shifts are from, it's a yes and shift. So it's saying required to desire, consuming to creating, going from saying, how do I make it interesting for you to how do I tap into your interests as well? And so I think that shift it's not a shift necessarily away from, but it's a shift into. And so it's keeping a foot in both of those two places at the same time.
That makes perfect sense. And I love this book. And, you read it and you think that it was just written, and then you look and you realize, oh, it's been a few years since he wrote this. But I think that it just speaks to how timely it is, how important it is. This is best teaching practices forever. This is not going to expire at any point. And so I love that. And I feel like when I read The Launch Cycle so many years ago, that really did help springboard me into project-based learning. And it was really groundbreaking then, just as much as it is now. So I appreciate your work so much. One of my favorite quotes from Empower is, every project is a story. And I've used it so many times to help teachers understand just how important this work is that we're doing, and that we won't always know the impact. You may hear from parents how impactful a certain project was, or kids may tell you, or it could be years from now. One of my favorite stories really quickly was taking project-based real-world learning. We were learning about the tidal basin at the National Mall in DC. And, the project just kept evolving, and I didn't have a plan. And I did much like what you said in your book, where it was like the kids started guiding and they had ideas. And so it was very much open. Well, it turns out that we worked with a park ranger virtually. They got to present to the superintendent of the park and engineers. And then later that year, one of my students went to visit the tidal basin over spring break and met the park ranger in person. And it all came full circle. And he told her someday he wants to be a park ranger because of this project. And I just tell that story because we don't know the impact. But that was pretty amazing. And that to me is my favorite story. And we all have favorite stories when we look back. So I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite story? We know that you're an educator and you have done all of these things in the education world. Do you have a favorite story where you can think about a project and its impact?
You know, there's so many different projects I could think of, or ones that I would imagine. One of my favorite examples, I'll just share actually two of them because I think that they show kind of the disparate ways it can go. One was we had a mural project where we had an issue of graffiti in the community. We painted this mural. And what I loved about that is the student who drew the initial, that very first example of a mural, the first one that we used, ended up going on to get an art degree. He was the first in his family to finish 8th grade, first one in his family to graduate high school, first to go to college. And he also had this love of animation as well. And so he ended up getting a job as an animator for an animation company, but painting murals on the side. And now it's kind of cool in the city where I taught, he has several different murals that he's painted. And a former student of mine is now an ELL teacher in that district and partners with him as an artist in residence. And they've painted additional murals in the community as well, the students. And it's just this ripple effect that's really cool. And I love that because, you know, it's an example of this through line of taking your passion and then turning it into an entrepreneurial work and taking that entrepreneurial mindset. But then I think about another student, and we did our Geek Out blogs, which is like our version of Genius Hour. And we had to do, I required the students to do a multimedia piece, which was a simple 2 to 3 minute video. And this particular student took forever to finish the video. He begged me not to make him do a video. He was like, I don't want to share in front of an audience. He was so scared. He was so shy. He was nervous about his English proficiency. And what I loved about it is he absolutely nailed the video. He did this cool edit where he was showing what he was tinkering on in his garage. He would snap a finger, and then he was in a library, and it was showing where he did research. He introduces the librarian. He was teaching him how to find resources. He snaps his finger again, and he's at his uncle's auto body shop. And then he snaps.
Oh, that's cool.
From place to place. And he edited it perfectly. I mean, nailed it. And what I love about this is he didn't take that passion, like he didn't end up going into video editing. He loved video editing in 8th grade, and he did a lot more videos but he continued that passion for making, and he's now an engineer, and he's a mechanical engineer. And again, same thing, first generation college student. And it's just, I love those stories because they're so serendipitous. You don't know where it's going to end, but now years later, you get to see it and you think, I was a tiny part of that. And that's an exciting thing to be like, I got to be a part of his story in some small way.
And it's interesting. I was rereading your book and got to that truth number 3 about stories, and that every project's a story. And I had made note of it when Karisa did. And, I was thinking about in our classrooms, the way we most of the time capture kids to start is to tell a story. And so, throughout time, that's how people share, learn, communicate. And I thought it was really interesting the way it just made me think about stories in a whole different way, and how that can lead to something that sparks in a kid.
It's interesting. One of the things I love about story is it's a permission for it to be imperfect. Like I have this this little sketch video I did years ago called Life Should Be Epic. And it basically says like life is meant to be a story, and it's meant to be an epic story. It doesn't begin once you've arrived. It doesn't begin once things get easy. It doesn't. And it will always have hard moments, conflict, all these things that good stories have. And I always play it for my students when they graduate. It's one of the little like end pieces that I like to share with them, is like, you're about to enter an epic journey as a teacher. I do that, and then I talk about the new teacher card, which is this whole thing that's like this permission to fail. But for me, one of the things about story is it's the recognition that it will be imperfect. And project-based learning in particular has moments where things don't go right, or things don't turn out the way that you think they're going to be in your head. And you can either be disappointed in it, or you can say, that's what good stories have. They have things that don't turn out perfect in the moment, and that's okay.
I love that. And I also love the fact that you gave him extra time on his project to help make his story. I think as teachers, we get frustrated instead of being flexible. And you were flexible enough with him to let him have that creative moment, but still, know that he's going to turn it in and have that expectation of turning it in. And if you hadn't, that could have changed his story.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting you talk about the book Empowered. The two pieces I wish we had done in that book, if I could do it all over again, would be that recognition right there of giving slack to develop grit, right? That the permission to make mistakes. And we kind of talked about it a little bit. There was this like diagram that I drew about the difference between failing and failure. But I think it's that permission to say like extended time and things like that. And then the other piece is taking a gradual release approach.
Right.
Like I wrote a blog post about it, and I wish that had been something I had included in the book, the recognition that you sometimes have to take a gradual release of responsibility approach, where you add more and more choice so kids don't get overwhelmed in the beginning, and gradually adding it and sometimes giving additional time is what some kids just really need. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it totally does.
It does, especially when you're trying to mirror the real world, right?
Right.
There is a lot of flexibility in the real world and chances to improve upon things and to learn new skills and apply what you've learned. And I think if that's our job, to get them ready for what's to come in the real world, I think that's so important. I'm so glad that Dayna pointed that out and you elaborated, because that is so important.
Yeah. And I think, as I was and again, I was telling Karisa right before you guys got on that I read about half the book, and then I was like, when was this written? Because it is so relevant that it was written in 2017. And that, the truth number 4 about the future and what the future holds and what we must give our students. I feel like when I started teaching 20 plus years ago, what I was to give my students was this base of knowledge, right? That they were going to make it through my classroom with this vocabulary and this skill set. And that is not at all what is going to make my children, the kids I have right now, successful in careers that we know nothing about yet. Right. Yeah. And so again, in my room, I even made a comment today, because, we're just past semester mark. And in a project-based classroom like that I teach in, the start of the year is hard with the first year group, because they have no grit. They have no resilience. They have no creativity, and they definitely wouldn't put themselves out there to try any of the 3. And like coming in the start of the semester, it's amazing in 6 months how much they've grown. And from your book, there's just things that kind of just, I don't know, they're just playing in my brain, like that failure doesn't include grit, resiliency, and can do. And those are the things, if I'm going to send future biomedical scientists out there, those are the key components. And we tell them all the time, it is hard to be a scientist, a mathematician. You have to be gritty. You're going to have to work harder than you've ever worked to get into nursing school, and then even harder to stay in it. And so it's interesting to me that the future holds a different student than I feel like we were coming out of school. And I think that your book gives a classroom teacher a kind of a look into how to make them ready for that future.
Yeah.
Well, you even say, we're preparing them not just for their job, but for anything, right? It's just to make students problem solvers of our future.
Yeah. And
well,
I think,
you go. No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say something that stuck with me recently. I was visiting an industry here local, and really local to Indianapolis. And one of the recruiters said one of the biggest things they're looking for are people who can influence without authority. And that really stuck with me. So people who have all these skills that we're talking about and don't necessarily have authority over anyone, but can be influencers in a room full of people, that can encourage people to dig deeper, that can encourage, students or other adults to push through even when it's hard. And so that has really stuck with me because, like Elaine said, that is not when we went through school. I mean, we were learning the vocabulary and all the knowledge came from the teacher. And then you had to have this to do the job. And I thought that was so interesting. You go ahead, but I had to share that.
Oh, no, I love that idea of the quiet influence, the influence without authority. That gives me a lot to think about myself. It's interesting when we wrote the book, it was I was 2017, and one of the things I put in there was that the ladder has become a maze, right? And the best way to prepare students for the future is to empower them in the present. We don't know what that maze will look like. And my kids were younger at the time, and so I shared the metaphor when they got older, and it was interesting to see how each of them responded. My oldest, who's super competitive, baseball player, plays college baseball, he said, I love the fact that it's not a competition. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, a ladder, you're competing against everyone on the rung, for the highest rung.
Yep.
And he said, this is more like an escape room. A maze is more like an escape room where the better you can collaborate with other people, communicate with them, connect with them, get people to learn from them. And it reminds me a little bit of that, like, it's that influence without authority. And it's that ability to be teachable and to be self-directed. And my middle son said, I love the fact that a maze, a ladder looks safe, but it's dangerous. He's like, Dad, if you fall off a ladder as a middle-aged man, you're going to urgent care, right?
Yep.
If you fall down, he just had to go there. He had to be like old man dad. But he said, but on the other hand, if you fall down in a maze, you can pick yourself back up, right? And my daughter, her response was, I love the fact that you can go your own way. And I love that she had just quoted Fleetwood Mac right back, which is awesome. But it reminded me of, that is the world that they're going to inhabit. You talked, Elaine, about solving hard problems. I love this notion in engineering and in within the sciences in particular, brought, outside of just engineering in the larger STEM world, of wicked problems. They're going to solve problems that lead to new problems.
Yep.
And that takes a lot of perseverance. That takes a lot of failure. That takes a lot of big challenges. And I think they begin to develop that in the primary grades, right? It takes like that. And sometimes it requires a shift in thinking towards self-direction. At the teacher level, honestly, at the parental level, letting your kid fail a little bit at a parental level. And it feels so risky, but then later on you see when it pays off. Yeah. This is
like it pays off over and over and over again. And I tell you what, one of the things that I think I'm going to carry with me, and I see this at the high school level as a teacher, is that a self-starter and a self-manager are self-directed, and we need our kids to be both, because I have some unbelievably brilliant kids. I can't get started.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the flip side, they start like a flash in the pan and I can't get them to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And we need, a future of doctors and researchers that are going to tackle these, things that we've never seen before, right? We need the future to be able to tackle the next COVID the way the current group did, and who would have thought when you wrote your book in 2017 that we basically would have to rewrite education completely because of COVID.
Yeah.
Throw it all
I
out.
think about, like when I wrote that book, I had just been introduced in 2016 to generative AI. And I was like, we're going to have chatbots that make things for us, like generating things that are entirely new in like 2035, 2040. I did not know. Like I was introduced to it, my mind was blown, and I was
That's
like,
right.
this is amazing. I did not know we would be where we are with AI. So I think about AI, I think about the pandemic, I think about the only thing that's predictable anymore for students is unpredictability. And that's it's hard, but it's also exciting.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we got to gear the way we learn to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have so many resources out there for teachers. I had always gone to the video writing prompts. Those were my favorite things to use in the classroom. And then I realized you've been creating even newer ones. What do you call the new ones? I linked it up there on the YouTube channel. What are your newest ones? Like just the sketch videos?
Yeah, they're all sketch videos.
Okay.
So I do writing prompts, and I have a YouTube channel, and some of them are just honestly sketch videos that I've made for my own students. I teach pre-service teachers now. So some of them I have like, Bloom's taxonomy, and they're very education oriented ones, or universal design for learning, things like that. Self-determination theory. And then I have ones that are definitely student facing writing prompts. And so I think my newest one was probably the one about the pros and cons of AI, and I think I did it too. So I have additional new writing prompts that I put up there as well.
They're so great. Talk about engaging kids in the writing process. They can watch a video instead of just reading through a bunch of directions on a piece of paper, and how much it changes. When I use them in the classroom, I would just have kids beg to post that video to Google Classroom. I need to rewatch it again. Can we do this during recess? I haven't written enough pages yet. They love to use Book Creator as a way to then create a book based on your video. So we can't thank you enough. There are so many resources here, and so many great ways to get in touch with what John is doing. You just have to click around. And what I love about your writing, it's so easy to digest and so easy to take an idea and to apply it immediately. You've done all of the hard work for everyone. So I really, really appreciate that. Dayna, do you want to take us out?
Sure. We will be at Purdue this coming week. 2 of us will, and we'll be doing the STEM conference there. And then we are also going to be visiting with Jen Gonzalez this next month, February 10th, and doing a live stream with her. And Yay for Cultivating Climate will be the theme of that. And I think this will feed right into that, the climate that we have to set for our classroom in order to have that collaboration and that project-based learning happening in our room. So we have lots of great guests coming up also in March and April. Jenny Long from Magic School and Andy Knieven from Canva to really gain a little bit more information from them. And our playlist is there, so you can check us out on YouTube. We would love your feedback. We are giving a book away for anyone who for one person who gives us feedback. We'll put you in a drawing. So please do that. And if you want to connect with John, the slides previous have links, so you can go straight to his blog and his other resources for writing that we've had. But we would love to connect with you also. So please reach out anytime, because we love to learn from others. And you know who we are. YaySTEM.
Thank you, John. You've been so amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.